Welcome back to Ask HR, where you get answers to your burning HR questions. We are joined by Tyrone Fitzgerald today. We're continuing our conversation on all things employment law. Welcome to Employment Law 101. Welcome back, Tyrone. And just before our break, we were talking about the employer's rights and responsibilities, and let's just continue a little bit on that and get into employee rights and responsibilities.
Right. Well, let me go back to employers, particularly in this pandemic. One of the primary duties of an employer is under the Health and Safety at Work Act to ensure the health, safety, and welfare of his employees or its employees or what have you. And by extension, those duties are also that he provides the relevant systems to ensure the health and safety of the work environment and his employees. We saw that the government spoke to that with the new COVID orders and
to provide masks,
right, and whatever is required so that they maintain that health and safety during this pandemic. And likewise, if we follow the same statutory duties under that act, employees are required to ensure their own health and safety. In other words, they don't do any acts that are negligent or reckless or whatever. And also to ensure the health and safety of, like the employer, of the customers or the vendors or, those third parties who also interact with the business. So I think we need to, keep that at the fore in terms of the rights and responsibilities and the duties.
So that's shared, because I'm sure that question
that's
is
a
coming
shared
up.
duty under the Health and Safety at Work Act.
Because people are going to say, well, my employer should provide my mask and should provide my hand sanitizer.
But you also have to ensure that you follow the proper protocols, whether it's
hand washing,
the physical distancing, whatever the case may be. It's not just, okay, what are they responsible to do for me, but what is my responsibility? So you have to meet the employer halfway when it comes to the statutory or legal duties in terms of health and safety and well-being. In addition to that, both parties definitely have to comply with the laws. And so one of the interesting aspects that a lot of people are watching, particularly employers, and I'm going to get to the employees' rights, but this relates to that, is the fact that under the Employment Amendment Act, after 12 weeks, if these temporary layoffs that we're seeing all around continue, then that automatically translates into dismissal by redundancy or because of redundancy. And so then employers,
with a consequent payout.
Redundancy pay, severance pay, unless there is there are provisions in the act that allow the minister responsible, which would be the Minister of Labor, which would be the Honorable Dion Folks. He has the avenue or the opportunity to then speak to new regulations, new laws that may extend the layoff period or other options like that to kind of step in if that should happen, particularly in this environment that we have now.
Because we're really not certain how long this is going to go on for. And I would imagine, quite honestly, we may not be in a lockdown situation for maybe more than 6 months, but I do believe that the economic impact of this is going to continue through the rest of the year. I honestly don't foresee, people being that comfortable with travel, and I think it's going to take a while for that and for extensive gatherings to really build momentum again. I think we're going to be in this virtual environment and a physical distancing environment for quite a long time, which now will present some unique changes and challenges perhaps to our workplaces and how we do work.
Yes. Right. And in terms of the employee's rights, like I said, the employee has a right to ensure that their health and safety and welfare, those things are taken care of. Okay. Whether legislatively or under the common law or what have you. They also have a right, again, to be properly notified if they're going to be laid off or made redundant or asked to take a paid leave or unpaid leave, that their consents have to be obtained.
And what if they don't consent? What if, because we have had this where people are being invited to utilize their vacation leave during this time because employers want people to be paid during this time. Right. But again, you don't want people to just be, if they're not working from home, for instance, if they don't have essential duties that can be carried out on a consistent basis from home, that take vacation leave, you can remain on the payroll, remain on the books. But some employees are like, well, I want my vacation. Like when this all goes away, I want to be able to take vacation. Like, how does this impact my actual vacation time and all of that?
Well, again, that is something that has to be discussed and agreed upon up front.
So what if they say, I want to keep my vacation leave. I don't want to take vacation during the pandemic.
Yes, but then again, you cannot have your cake and eat it too, because this is a unique situation. And you have to be mindful of the resources available to employers. I mean, it's that simple. It's not a never-ending well of resources available to employers. And so employees have to be understanding. Okay, and the employers bear a responsibility with that to effectively communicate, and that's an important and critical element in terms of leadership. In terms of communicating properly, so that people understand the context. You don't have to explain everything, but understand the situation that's going on, the situation as it relates to the business, the business, the contingencies that we have available, the flexible resourcing options that we have or are working out, and how much they're valued in that process.
Absolutely.
And I think if people understand that, I think they will understand that particularly in this environment, there has to be some give and take within the ambit of the law.
Right.
And so both parties, employer or employee, cannot have their cake and eat it too. I mean, that's the simplest I can put it, Simone.
It's true, because I know of an employee who, among other persons, were sent home, right? And they were told, well, we can't pay you during this time.
Okay.
But
so that was an unpaid leave.
Unpaid leave.
Okay.
However, they've been asked to work by the employer, but not offered any compensation. Like, to me, that's wanting your cake and eating it too, from the employer's standpoint.
Okay.
Like, you go home, I can't pay you, but I still want you to do work while you're home.
Okay, here's the thing. People don't know that when you are laid off, an employer is not obliged in law to give you work if you are being paid your compensation or your wages. So once I'm paying you, I don't necessarily have to give you work. But it doesn't work unless I agree to that unpaid leave. And those terms and conditions are made very clear.
Well, they weren't given
what
a
that
choice.
Means.
They weren't given a choice. They were just told.
Well,
right? It wasn't a consensual thing. They were told, go home. I can't pay you in this time. But then still being asked to perform certain duties while they're at home. Unpaid leave.
If that was the financial position of the employer, in that they had no choice but to make certain business decisions, which would have meant the person is still employed. That's my understanding, right?
Yes, still
okay,
employed.
So you're still employed. Okay, so you're temporarily laid off, and the condition of that is it's going to be an unpaid leave.
Right.
Okay. The point with that is the employer must understand that he, she, or it had to have obtained that mutual consent or agreement to vary the contract to be able to do that.
Right.
Now, if that wasn't done, that is a no-no.
Right.
Because then the whole premise upon which the unpaid leave is based on is questionable or could be voided or voidable in terms, or not even voided or voidable, but whether or not it's legal in the context of the the employee-employee contract and the laws around that.
So could an employee in a situation like that request pay even at a later date? Like if the business comes back and is functioning again, could that employee, because there was not a mutual agreement, come back and say, I would wish to be paid for that period of time when I was not at work? Is that legal?
Now, when they were not at work, again,
they were sent home and their consent was not obtained.
Okay, so you're asking...
Could they ask at a later date, can I be paid for that period of time?
That's questionable in the sense that either you are going to basically file a claim or a lawsuit against your employer for breach of contract because those consents were not obtained beforehand and go that route.
And that sounds like a nasty route.
I understand the implications of that because once you start suing your employer,
they don't want any part of you anymore.
Okay. So that's the practical aspect of it, right?
Yeah.
Now, again, it doesn't always have to be contentious
right.
or litigious.
Right.
We have to get out of that mindset. This is an opportunity for dialogue. This is an opportunity for communication.
Right.
This is an opportunity for true leadership, which is based on empathy at this time.
Exactly.
Okay? And that works both ways. See, employees sometimes take the victim default mode.
Yes.
And I take exception. I have an issue with that as well.
I do too.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because you have to empower yourself
you have to speak up.
with information, and you have to speak up.
Right.
But you have to do it
respectfully,
intelligently, and strategically.
Exactly.
Okay. So I would not advise an employee, because one thing you have to be mindful of is you do still have a job.
Right.
Okay?
Right.
I need to make that very clear. Okay? And not that that's some privilege or you have to be glad or whatever.
But it is
I just want that reminder and that reality to come to the fore, because a lot of people are not in that position. Okay? So working in that context, I think you need to find common ground.
Right.
Both employers and employees.
Yes.
In terms of, let's work it out. Let's agree to how this is going to be compensated in the future. Okay? If it isn't, then you know what the other legal avenue is as an employee.
Right. Because I think one of the spillover effects, and I don't want to jump the gun because I want us to talk about that in another segment of this show, but trust is going to be a huge factor between the parties. People coming back to work, trust among each other as team members, trust between employer and employee, how it was handled.
Mutual trust and confidence is actually an implied term of the employer-employee contract, and if that breaks down, okay, in any way, an employee has a right to sue for constructive dismissal if there is a fundamental breach of that trust and confidence.
And what is constructive dismissal?
Well, constructive dismissal is a type of dismissal or that's available in law once there is a breach of the employer-employee contract.
Okay.
Whether an express term of that contract, let's say in terms of confidentiality or whatever, or an implied term in terms of trust and confidence that I have in the employer. Once that breaks down, then, and I have evidence to support that, I can have a claim for constructive dismissal.
Okay.
Okay? But again, it need not get to that if it doesn't have to.
Right.
I have to keep emphasizing that because, and we have to get out of this acrimonious, litigious,
polarized hostile
relationship between and
us against them.
Right. And maybe sometimes employers may be responsible for that, for the reason why there may be that lack of trust, and vice versa.
Yeah, it's on both sides.
And I always tell people, whether it's a toxic environment, an unethical workplace, or a lack of empathy or whatever, it's always a question of leadership.
And I've always said, you're absolutely
always
right.
A question of
absolutely
leadership.
Right. And that goes again on both sides, because we are all leaders.
Yes.
In our own right.
Yes.
You know, even as an employee, I can function with a leadership mentality.
Yes.
So when you talk about communicating with, being informed, being strategic, those are leadership qualities.
Of course.
That anyone can employ.
Right.
You understand? And so and this is something that I've always seen from an HR perspective, from the employee standpoint. And, you know, again, we're on that side of rights and responsibilities, that employees don't fully know what their rights and responsibilities are. They don't fully know the terms and conditions of their employment agreement, the employment contract. They don't know the law and what the law provides, and especially if they've worked in maybe a unionized environment before, there's always some cloud of confusion between a bargaining agreement and the terms and conditions in a bargaining agreement versus what the law provides. So they would come to a place that's not unionized and say, well, I'm supposed to get my birthday off, for instance, or I'm supposed to get
Christmas,
or I'm supposed to get a bonus, or all these other things that may be built into a specific agreement that has nothing to do with this particular company where they're working now.
Well, speaking of rights, again, you know, employees have a right to have the national insurance contributions paid and on time, and you know that has shed a light on this within this whole pandemic as well.
Yes, even internationally,
right? They have a right to ensure that they're paid and get a pay slip. They have there are certain rights that are fundamental. But back to that issue you spoke about in terms of, you know, whether they can come from a unionized environment to a non-unionized environment, and what does the bargaining agreement look like compared to a supplemental to the employment agreement. I think we have to get out of this entitlement mentality as employees. Okay?
You're hitting hard. You're hitting hard.
Oh, I'm asking for fun. I know. Right?
Let's do it.
Right.
Yes.
Because that is a disempowered state to me.
It is.
Okay?
It is.
And you always should operate in a philosophical way from an empowered position.
Absolutely.
Okay? And when employers see that disempowered motivation for something or benefits you feel entitled to, then I think you make yourselves a lot more vulnerable.
Of course.
And particularly in non-unionized environments, because I can leverage that. There's so many things employers do with that from the standpoint, I mean, rightly or wrongly or justifiably or not. But you have to understand that, you know, coming from that position, puts you in a more vulnerable state to me.
But it goes back again to the trust and the confidence from the employer side, because they're looking, any business owner is looking at, this is
the bottom line.
This is an exchange.
Exactly.
Right? So how is it that you're right? Because now you're setting up a win-lose scenario for me as the employer. Right? I'm here, I want to make money so that we all can win, right? We all can benefit from the company. But if you're getting the lion's share of this arrangement, then you've put me in a losing position. And no business owner goes into business to lose.
This is not a socialist system of government. You know, most work environments are not a socialist system of government where you have some basic entitlements that extend perhaps further than we can afford. Let me be very clear with that, particularly in this pandemic, because I've been getting some things back, and employees are, we think we should have gotten this. Employers lack compassion and soul and all this other stuff. We throw that out. And there may be some truth to that. But I think we we neglect and forget that these people are operating businesses whose primary objective and goal is to make money, and more so than make money, make a profit.
Over the long term.
Okay, let's be very clear about that, and let's not forget that. Yes, the compassionate, humane, caring aspect should come into play, ought to come into play from a moral standpoint.
Absolutely.
And this pandemic. Don't get me wrong.
And that's where I feel HR is very important to ensure that happens.
But there still has to be a balanced approach all around.
Absolutely.
Okay, because I still cannot provide for you what I do not have.
Everything has a cost.
Okay.
And that's where I think sometimes people don't understand that everything has a cost. Everything. So the day you decide, you know what, I just want to take a break and let me scroll my Facebook page, there's a cost attached to that. Because we're paying for electricity, we're paying for that internet connection, we're paying for that equipment that you're on, and the time that you spent not working, not productive is still a cost because I'm paying you.
All right.
Right? And so the same goes to play if you are at home right now, expecting to be paid, but then you're not producing anything for the company.
Expecting you to work remotely.
Right.
Okay. Now, I may not have given you the guidelines or the whatever, and that's a fault on my part from the employer's perspective.
Right.
But at the same time, like you say, you know, you then have to manage up.
Right.
And say, okay, I'm unclear as to what are my responsibilities on a daily basis. When am I supposed to be checking in? What are the accountabilities?
Right.
Am I to make reports at the end of the day?
Correct.
You know, that
Correct.
sort of thing. And you would be surprised post COVID-19 how well you place yourself.
That's right.
In terms of the perception and the performance and all of these things.
Absolutely, because I mean, again, I don't want to jump the gun, but this time right here is from the employee standpoint is where you're going to prove your worth.
You got it.
Because now we're going to move into some leaner times.
Oh, yes.
Leaner not only from a financial standpoint, but leaner as far as how we operate. And employers are going to see now who is really valuable to this operation, not out of loyalty, but out of value, contribution. Who was I able to depend on? Who was actually able to still crunch the workout? Who was able to respond quickly or at least respond at all to this new technical environment?
And let me add to that, particularly after 12 months, as you say, if we're still in this pandemic, when I have in law the right to then determine, okay, are these jobs necessary or can I make them redundant?
The 12-week
layoff
period,
yes. No. I'm not even talking. I'm talking about after 12 months. I have a right to make a decision as to what's going to happen in terms of redundancies and how those redundancies are to work. What's the redundancy matrix going to look like in terms of what's the criteria that I'm going to be assessing who I'm going to keep on and who I'm going to let go.
Yeah. And value add is going to be that major consideration.
Right.
Because again, you're looking at business continuity. Right. How can this business function?
Right. And employees who are temporarily laid off in particular need to be reminded you are still employed, still under a microscope, still monitored, still ought to be in compliance with those company policies and procedures, even though we are operating in a unique environment now that you probably were not accustomed to. Those things still apply. Everything still applies. It may be modified or tweaked to the circumstances or condition. Okay? But you're still being evaluated as an employee.
Yes, absolutely.
Be very clear about that. Very, very clear.
And perception right now is everything on both sides of the table.
So you have to be, you have to really take a balanced approach. And right now we keep hearing, the poor employee, the victimized employee, the disadvantaged employee and whatever. But, you know, we really have to kind of recalibrate.
Absolutely.
Recalibrate that. And take a more objective and reasoned approach.
Absolutely.
And look at both the duties and responsibilities, rights and obligations of both parties.
Both, absolutely. Because I've said that this pandemic has only revealed what already existed.
Yes.
So some of these issues we've already and have been dealing with, and it's only now forced them to the surface. We're going to have to deal with them effectively as we move on. So I am so excited to come back and talk to you in our final segment about where do we go from here? Where do we go post COVID-19? Thank you for tuning in to Ask HR.